Being overwhelmed is not something that's happening to you. You're actually creating the overwhelm in your life. And if you feel a little bit triggered by that, then that's a good thing. And you probably know it's true. So in this video, I'm going to give you some actionable steps to help you fix that today. And feeling overwhelmed is something that I hear every day from people. I get approached about it every single day. It's one of the biggest causes of people's self-sabotage, okay? But here's how I want you to think about this. I want you to split it down into three sections, which I'm going to talk about on this video today. The first of those being prioritization. Second being your environment. And the third one being your unhealthy coping mechanisms. Okay, and the thing is, going back to the point I made, your overwhelm is created by yourself. It's not something that happens to you, it's something that you are designing yourself. And if you can fix your prioritization, your environment, and get a hold of your unhealthy coping mechanisms, you're going to eliminate this feeling of being overwhelmed, okay? This is within your control, and this is the point that I want to make here. And the good thing about this is that if you can actually deal with these three things and you feel less overwhelmed, your business is going to make more money as a byproduct, okay? So instead of looking for fancy hacks or tactics, take this in today and I promise you your business will make more money. And the first point is prioritization. Most people that I talk to wake up in the morning and they feel like they've got a million things to do, okay? And I get it, I have been there. But the reality is that you should only be focusing on one, maybe two at maximum things per day that move your business along the quickest. But instead, when you've got a to-do list the size of a Bohemian Rhapsody song, it's almost like a grocery list, right? And if you've got 30 tasks written down on a piece of paper, of course that's going to seem overwhelming. And the consequences of just waking up and trying to freeball the day without having a plan is that you probably get to lunchtime and you realise that you've not done anything, and then the day progresses and you get on, it gets to dinner time, you've had your dinner, you go to bed that night and you realise that you've not actually done anything. You are no step further towards your goal. And I guarantee you that if you have experienced this, then you're probably caught in a cycle, and it's probably been happening for quite some time. And to add to that, it could be costing you hundreds of thousands of pounds in revenue every single year. And when you don't prioritise, what you're telling yourself is that you've got all these things to do. Okay, so let me just draw these arrows, and each one of these arrows is going to represent a task that you have to do throughout the day. So there's 8 here. If you have 8 tasks that you're telling yourself you have to do, what usually happens, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that you don't do any and you get paralysed and you stay here. And that's why you start feeling overwhelmed, okay? But here's the thing, and you may as well even do half of one, move on to another one, move on to the next, move on to the next, move on to the next, but you never get to the finish line with anything. And that's why, if you can focus on one task, that arrow will move along so much more quicker as long as you can prioritise the right things. And the traditional way that people do this is they write lists for themselves, okay? They'll number a task list, and maybe they've got 30, maybe they've got 10, whatever it is. But here's the thing, I want you every single morning or the night before you're working to pick one task that moves your business forward the most. And this, funnily enough, this is probably the one that you really don't want to do. Okay, this task here is probably the one that's giving you most frustration. Okay, the one that you feel most friction towards doing. But if you pick that one task and prioritize correctly and just do that number 2 task that I've circled there, that is your task for the day, nothing else. And when you can do this day in, day out, instead of doing 30 things every day and just do this one every single day, I promise you the difference you will feel even just after a few weeks will be indescribable compared to the cycle of self-sabotage that you're in right now. The second point is your environment. Far too many people I talk to, their environment is absolutely chaotic, okay? And if you take the most productive people in the world and you put them in your environment, they won't be productive. So what makes you think that without changing your environment, you're somehow going to be productive? To be honest with you, that's a little bit of your ego talking if you are thinking that way. And what I mean by that is the digital and your workspace environment, okay? And if you're watching this, you know what it's like with digital workspace. It's constant bombardment of distractions, information, and to be quite honest with you, you'd be better switching it all off and just doing the actual work. And when you're trying to do deep work, the last thing you want is distractions, because the last thing the brain wants is for context shifts to keep happening. For example, you could be in your deep work, an email pops up, you go and check that, you try and get working again, but you can't, or someone comes into the room, or someone tries to call you, or someone texts you, or your workspace is extremely chaotic and messy, and that's all your brain can focus on rather than the work at hand. And again, to top it all off, a bad environment could be costing you hundreds of thousands of pounds in revenue in your business, and I promise you that is the case because I've seen it time and time again. Now, your environment, coming on to that again, okay, and the things that people's digital environment and their workspace, okay, is what I wanted to talk about. Now, let me talk about workspace first of all. This is something that should be neat and tidy, okay? No chaos involved here, okay? The less chaotic your work environment is, the better. The cleaner it is, the better. But if you're trying to work in a workspace that is completely chaotic, well, guess what? That's what your brain's going to be. Your brain is going to be chaotic. Again, contributing to this feeling of being overwhelmed. Now, the second thing is, as well as cleaning up your workspace, you have to have deep work sessions, okay? But when you do this, you have to design your environment for maximum success. And if you have your laptop open with emails, your phone there with texts, notifications, people walking in the door, this is all bad for your environment, okay? So I'm not asking you to do deep work sessions for the full day, but what I am saying is that you should have periods of time, even for a few hours at very least per day, where you are uncontactable. And if you think that's unrealistic to be uncontactable for a few hours, then you're going to learn the hard way that your business is not going to grow, okay? It's a few hours of deep work. And if you've ever listened to Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger talking about what the biggest key to their success was, it was focus. Focus is everything. And when your environment is bad, you can forget the focus. You're not going to get anywhere. So please clean your workspace. And while you're doing deep work sessions, get rid of emails, texts, notifications. Make sure no one can walk in while you're there working away, and make sure you're uncontactable for even at least a few hours per day. And the third point is your unhealthy coping mechanisms, okay? And this one hits close to home for me because I had many coping mechanisms, okay? But the biggest one for me was alcohol. I was a binge drinker, okay? I haven't had a drink in about 4 years now. But that single coping mechanism was costing me absolutely everything in business and in my life in general. But there's a vast array of unhealthy coping mechanisms that people have messaged me about, okay? And they're not exclusive to this list, but drinking, gaming, binging YouTube, smoking, vaping, you name it. These unhealthy coping mechanisms are not aligned with growing your business. And again, if you think you can grow your business while maintaining these unhealthy coping mechanisms, then again, that's your ego talking. Because in the exact same scenario as I used earlier, if a successful person had your unhealthy coping mechanisms, they wouldn't be successful. And the consequences to these unhealthy coping mechanisms is almost infinite, okay? And I say that from personal experience. Never mind how much the actual habit is costing you to do it, think of the opportunity cost that you're missing out on. And that's like one of my clients, Sean, who had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Within 3 months of quitting alcohol, Sean had tripled the revenue in his business that he's been running for 15 years. And that wasn't a coincidence. That's not by accident. It's because he removed these unhealthy coping mechanisms from his life. So if you actually want to grow your business and you have unhealthy coping mechanisms, then do something about it. Realize that you're in this cycle and take proper action. And lastly, but certainly not the least, the one that was the biggest plague on my life is unhealthy coping mechanisms. Now, the thing about unhealthy coping mechanisms is that they're obviously tough, and you can obviously, depending on your level of dependency on these things, you can experience cravings, which I will go into in a minute. But the biggest thing for me was that I had to find a mission, okay? I had to find a mission for my life that would eradicate the need for my coping mechanisms, okay? And this is very important. And there's a quote that, with a strong enough why, and this is from Viktor Frankl's book, The Man's Search for Meaning, if I'm not mistaken. With a strong enough why, you can bear anyhow. Okay, and what he is meaning here is that if your mission is strong enough, the idea of not drinking or not smoking or not gaming or not smoking, or not taking drugs, whatever that may be, if you've got a strong enough mission in your life, the idea of giving these up feels so minute compared to the goal and compared to the mission. Okay, so you need to find a reason for being a reason for your business. And if you haven't done that, I really do urge you, take a full day and figure that out. That's something I do every 6 months. One full day, all I think about is my mission for the next 6 months. But again, it's something that you've probably heard before, but again, how many of you have actually sat down for a day and done that? Now, the second thing here with unhealthy coping mechanisms is something called playing the tape forward. And this is a technique that's used for cravings, okay, especially big in the alcohol world, but you can use it for absolutely anything, to be quite honest with you. Now, playing the tape forward is the idea that you can create a mental movie in your head of what the next few days or the next few hours will be after you use an unhealthy coping mechanism. So to give you an example, on a Friday night when I used to go out binge drinking, when I first quit alcohol, I used to sit on a Friday night and I actually wrote out a full mental movie of where my first drink would take me, what would happen that night, what would the consequences be the next day, what would happen on the Sunday, how bad I would feel trying to work on the Monday. I had a complete mental movie of how that weekend would go because I'd lived it 100 times before. And I guarantee if you've got an unhealthy coping mechanism, you've lived that day 100,000 times before, much like I have. So this, playing the tape forward, can come quite easily to you. So I really do advise you to write down the mental movie of where your bad habits will take you over the next few hours, over the next few days, whatever cycle you're in. Think about this tape. And what to do is, when you're craving alcohol, is sit down. Or craving alcohol is my example, but whenever you're craving your unhealthy coping mechanism, sit down and imagine this movie. Imagine the movie and play through all the way to the end. Because the end of the movie is always filled with regret. And if you can try and bring that regret to the time that you're actually craving the substance itself, I promise you have so much more likelihood of overcoming unhealthy coping mechanisms. So if you can prioritise, you can fix your environment, and you can get rid of your unhealthy coping mechanisms, I promise you this, within a few months, you will not feel overwhelmed at all anymore. And remember, going back to my original point, overwhelm is not something that's happening to you. You're creating the overwhelm in your life. You're creating the stress. People often have this backwards. They think they use their unhealthy coping mechanisms because they're stressed. But that unhealthy coping mechanism is creating the stress. But once you flip your mind on this, you can break free of that vicious cycle. And if you've made it this far in the video, click on the description below, find my Instagram, give me a message on there, and I'd love to see how I can help you end your self-sabotage and grow your business. So stop looking for information and tactics and business hacks out there. What you really need to do is end your self-sabotage, because if you don't end your self-sabotage, it doesn't matter what information you have, you will never take action on it. So just drop me a message with the word sabotage and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can, and I hope you enjoyed today's video.